Captain Marcus Thompson adjusted his headset as he guided his Cessna Citation through the morning sky over Nevada. The landscape below looked like a patchwork quilt of desert browns and rocky formations. He had been flying this route for 3 years now, but today felt different. There was something in the air that made him uneasy, though he couldn't put his finger on what it was. Marcus worked as a government contractor pilot, transporting sensitive documents and personnel between military installations. His security clearance allowed him access to restricted airspace that most civilian pilots could only dream of entering. At 38 years old, he had logged over 15,000 flight hours, including time in the Air Force before transitioning to contract work. The radio crackled to life, interrupting his thoughts. Citation N4847X, this is Nellis Tower. State your business in our airspace immediately. Marcus frowned. This was unusual. His flight plan had been filed properly, and he had all the necessary clearances for this route. He pressed the transmit button on his yoke. Nellis Tower, this is Citation N4847X. I'm on a scheduled government transport mission. Flight plan filed under contract number Alpha 779. There was a long pause before the response came, and when it did, the tone was noticeably more aggressive. Citation N4847X, we have no record of your flight plan. You are ordered to land immediately at Nellis Air Force Base. Follow the heading we're about to transmit and make no deviations. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Something was seriously wrong. He had double-checked everything before takeoff from Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. His passenger manifest included 2 Pentagon officials who were supposed to attend a classified briefing at Area 51. The documents in his cargo hold were marked with classification levels that required his exact security clearance to transport Nellis Tower. Please verify with flight operations. My clearance level is top secret SCI with additional compartmented access. This mission was authorized by Defense Intelligence Agency. The radio went silent for what felt like an eternity. Marcus looked back at his passengers. Colonel Sarah Mitchell, a decorated intelligence officer, was reading through classified files with a concerned expression. Beside her, Dr. James Reynolds from the Pentagon's Advanced Research Projects Division was typing rapidly on a secured laptop. Neither had heard the radio exchange over the engine noise, but Marcus knew they would need to be briefed soon if this situation escalated. Marcus had encountered military intercepts before, but this felt different. Usually, when there were clearance issues, they were resolved quickly with a few radio calls. The silence stretching from Nellis Tower suggested something more serious was happening. He began running through emergency procedures in his mind while maintaining his current heading. His career had started in the Air Force, flying transport missions in Afghanistan and Iraq. After completing his service, the transition to contract work had seemed natural. The pay was better, and he got to work with cutting-edge aviation technology while still serving his country. But moments like this reminded him why military aviation could be so stressful. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly below, dotted with military installations that didn't appear on civilian maps. Marcus knew this area was home to some of the most classified operations in the United States military: test flights of experimental aircraft, weapons development, and intelligence operations that the public would never learn about. His security clearance gave him access to this world, but it also came with responsibilities and risks that civilian pilots never faced. Citation N4847X. We're scrambling fighters to escort you to Nellis. Do not deviate from your current heading. Any course changes will be considered hostile action. Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Fighter escort meant this had escalated to a potential national security threat level. He had never experienced anything like this in his 3 years of contract flying. His hands remained steady on the controls, but his mind raced through possibilities. Had there been a security breach? Was someone on his passenger list compromised? Had the documents in his cargo hold been flagged for some reason? The radio crackled again. Citation N4847X. Reduce speed to 180 knots and descend to flight level 200. Military aircraft will be visible on your left side momentarily. Marcus complied immediately, pulling back on the throttles and beginning a gradual descent. Through his left window, he could see 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons approaching rapidly. The fighters took positions on either side of his aircraft, close enough that he could see the pilots' helmets. This was definitely not a routine clearance verification. Colonel Mitchell finally looked up from her files. noticing the change in engine tone as Marcus reduced power. She unbuckled her seatbelt and moved forward to the cockpit area. "Is everything all right, Captain Thompson?" Marcus turned briefly to face her. "Ma'am, we're being directed to land at Nellis immediately. They're claiming they have no record of our flight plan, and we now have fighter escort." The colonel's expression darkened. "That's impossible. This mission was coordinated at the highest levels." "Let me speak with them." Marcus handed her a spare headset. Colonel Mitchell was well known in intelligence circles, and her security clearance was among the highest in the military. If anyone could resolve this situation, it would be her. She adjusted the microphone and keyed the transmit button. "Nellis Tower, this is Colonel Sarah Mitchell, Defense Intelligence Agency. I'm aboard Citation N4847X on official business. Please connect me with your base commander immediately." The response came quickly this time. "Colonel Mitchell, we're going to need you to verify your identity upon landing. The base commander is already aware of the situation and will meet you personally." Marcus continued the descent while monitoring his instruments carefully. The F-16s maintained their positions, a constant reminder that this situation could escalate further if protocols weren't followed exactly. He had trained for emergency landings and security situations, but having fighter aircraft escort him to an unscheduled landing was definitely a first. Dr. Reynolds had also noticed the commotion and moved forward. "What's the situation, Colonel?" "Some kind of clearance issue," she replied tersely. "Nothing we can't handle once we're on the ground." Marcus hoped she was right, but the knot in his stomach suggested this was just the beginning of a very long day. As Nellis Air Force Base appeared on the horizon, he began preparing for what might be the most important landing of his career. The landing at Nellis Air Force Base was unlike anything Marcus had experienced in his career. As soon as his Cessna Citation touched down on the runway, he was directed to taxi to an isolated area of the airfield surrounded by security vehicles. Military police in full tactical gear were positioned around the perimeter, their weapons clearly visible but not directly threatening. Marcus shut down the engines and began his post-flight checklist, though his hands were trembling slightly. Through the cockpit windows, he could see a convoy of black SUVs approaching the aircraft, flanked by security personnel. This level of response suggested either a massive security breach or a serious misunderstanding that had spiraled out of control. Colonel Mitchell remained calm as she gathered her classified documents, sealing them in a secured briefcase that required her biometric signature to open. Dr. Reynolds appeared more nervous, constantly checking his secured laptop and encrypted communication device. Both passengers had dealt with classified information their entire careers, but this situation was clearly unprecedented for them as well. A sharp knock on the aircraft door interrupted the tense silence. Marcus opened the cabin door to find a stern-faced Air Force Security Forces captain, flanked by 2 armed guards. Behind them stood a man in a dark suit who appeared to be federal law enforcement. "Captain Thompson, Colonel Mitchell, Dr. Reynolds," the Security Forces captain announced, reading from a tablet. "You're all going to need to come with us for immediate debriefing. This aircraft and all contents are being impounded pending a security investigation." Colonel Mitchell stepped forward, her military bearing evident despite the circumstances. "Captain, I demand to speak with your base commander immediately. This is highly irregular, and I can assure you that all proper protocols were followed for this mission." The man in the dark suit stepped forward. "Colonel, I'm Agent Harrison with the Defense Security Service. We understand your concern, but there are questions about the authorization for this flight that need immediate clarification. The base commander is waiting for you in the secure briefing facility." Marcus felt increasingly uneasy as they were escorted across the tarmac. Military bases were familiar territory for him, but being treated as a potential security threat was completely new. Security personnel formed a loose perimeter around their group as they walked, making it clear that this wasn't optional cooperation. The secure briefing facility was a nondescript building with no windows and multiple layers of electronic security. As they passed through each checkpoint, their identification was scanned, photographed, and verified against multiple databases. The process took nearly 30 minutes, during which time no one spoke except to answer direct questions from security personnel. Finally, they were led into a sterile conference room where Base Commander Colonel Robert Hayes was waiting, along with several other military officers and federal agents. The tension in the room was palpable, and Marcus noticed that recording equipment was already running. Colonel Hayes stood as they entered. Colonel Mitchell, I apologize for the circumstances, but we have a significant problem. The flight plan you filed yesterday has been flagged by multiple intelligence agencies as potentially compromised. Colonel Mitchell's composure cracked slightly. Compromised how? This mission was coordinated through proper channels with full DIA authorization. Agent Harrison consulted his tablet before responding. Ma'am, we received intelligence this morning suggesting that your flight plan details were accessed by unauthorized personnel. Additionally, one of the documents in your cargo manifest has been reported as stolen from a classified facility. Dr. Reynolds went pale. That's impossible. I personally verified every document before departure. Everything came directly from approved sources with proper chain of custody documentation. Marcus finally spoke up. Sir, I've been flying government contracts for 3 years without incident. My security clearance is current, and I followed every protocol exactly as trained. Colonel Hayes nodded grimly. Captain Thompson, we're not questioning your professionalism or loyalty. However, the situation has raised flags at the highest levels of national security. We need to verify everything from the beginning. The next hour was spent going through every detail of the mission planning process. Colonel Mitchell and Dr. Reynolds provided documentation for their authorization requests, travel orders, and document manifests. Marcus produced his flight plan, clearance certificates, and passenger authorization forms. Every piece of paper was photographed and sent electronically to verification centers around the country. During the questioning, Marcus learned details about his passenger's mission that his clearance level hadn't previously allowed him to know. They were transporting preliminary research data about advanced radar-defeating technology that was being developed for next-generation military aircraft. The information was so sensitive that only a handful of people in the entire government were authorized to handle it. Agent Harrison received a phone call that seemed to change the atmosphere in the room. After a brief conversation, he approached Colonel Hayes and whispered something that made the base commander's expression shift from stern concern to confusion. Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Hayes announced, we're receiving conflicting information from Washington. Your mission authorization appears legitimate according to DIA records, but Defense Department computers are showing no record of approval for this specific flight. Colonel Mitchell stood up abruptly. Sir, with respect, this sounds like a computer system error, not a security breach. These kinds of database synchronization problems happen more often than anyone wants to admit. Dr. Reynolds nodded in agreement. Colonel Hayes, I've dealt with classified computer systems for 15 years. Cross-agency database conflicts are unfortunately common when multiple security clearance levels are involved. Marcus remained silent, but privately agreed with his passengers. During his Air Force service, he had encountered numerous situations where different computer systems contained conflicting information about classified operations. The security bureaucracy was notoriously complex and prone to technical glitches. Agent Harrison finished another phone call and returned to the group. We're getting pushback from multiple agencies. NSA confirms your clearances are valid and current. CIA shows mission approval in their system, but Pentagon Security Database shows this entire operation as unauthorized. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Marcus realized they were caught in the middle of what appeared to be an interagency communication failure, rather than an actual security threat. However, until the discrepancies could be resolved, they would remain under security hold. Colonel Hayes checked his watch. It's now 14:30 hours. Your scheduled arrival at the destination was supposed to be 1500. We need to resolve this quickly or your mission timeline will be completely compromised. Marcus looked at his passengers, both of whom appeared frustrated but resigned to the delay. In the world of classified government operations, security always took precedence over convenience or scheduling. They would wait as long as necessary to clear their names and complete their mission, even if it meant spending the rest of the day in military custody. 2 hours into the security hold, the atmosphere in the briefing room had grown increasingly tense. Marcus sat quietly reviewing his flight logs while Colonel Mitchell paced near the windows, occasionally checking her secured communication device. Dr. Reynolds had been allowed to make one encrypted phone call to his Pentagon supervisor, but the conversation had only seemed to add more confusion to an already complicated situation. Agent Harrison entered the room, carrying a thick folder of documents, his expression more puzzled than concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting some very interesting information from Washington. It appears that your mission exists in some computer systems but not others, and the pattern doesn't make sense. Colonel Hayes looked up from his own stack of paperwork. What kind of pattern, Agent Harrison? Sir, the mission appears in all the older legacy computer systems that agencies use for historical record-keeping. However, it's completely absent from the newer integrated databases that were supposed to contain copies of everything from the legacy systems. Colonel Mitchell stopped pacing. That suggests the mission was entered into the system some time ago, but when the databases were synchronized, something went wrong with the transfer process. Marcus had remained quiet during most of the discussions, but this technical explanation prompted him to speak up. In the Air Force, we encountered similar problems when they upgraded the flight planning computers. Sometimes older missions would disappear from the new system, while remaining visible in backup databases. Dr. Reynolds nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. This sounds like a database migration error, not a security breach. When agencies update their computer systems, data sometimes gets lost or corrupted during the transfer process. Agent Harrison consulted his notes. The complicating factor is that your specific flight plan triggered automated security alerts in 3 different systems simultaneously. That's extremely unusual, and suggests either a very sophisticated attack or a very unlikely series of technical failures. Colonel Hayes received a phone call that lasted several minutes. During the conversation, Marcus noticed his expression shifting from concern to confusion to what appeared to be relief. When he hung up, the base commander addressed the room with renewed energy. Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting some clarity from the Pentagon. It appears that your mission was classified at such a high level that it was deliberately compartmentalized from normal database systems. Only a very small number of people had access to the complete information. Colonel Mitchell raised an eyebrow. Sir, my security clearance should have been sufficient to access any information related to my own mission. Ma'am, that's where this gets interesting. Your mission was apparently classified above your normal clearance level, specifically because of the technology Dr. Reynolds was transporting. The research data in your cargo hold is related to projects that even most Pentagon officials don't know exist. Dr. Reynolds looked genuinely surprised. Colonel Hayes, I was briefed that this was sensitive technology, but I wasn't told it was classified at Black Project levels. My understanding was that this was standard advanced research documentation. Agent Harrison interrupted before Colonel Hayes could respond. Dr. Reynolds, what exactly do you know about the radar-defeating technology in your cargo hold? I know it's related to next-generation aircraft stealth capabilities, but the specific technical details are outside my area of expertise. I was simply transporting the documentation to researchers who needed to evaluate its potential applications. Marcus listened to this exchange with growing concern. During his Air Force service, he had heard whispers about black projects, classified research programs so secret that their very existence was known only to a handful of people. If he had unknowingly become involved in transporting black project materials, it explained why the security response had been so extreme. Colonel Hayes received another phone call, this one much shorter. When he finished, he stood and addressed the room with obvious relief. Ladies and gentlemen, we have resolution from the highest levels. Your mission has been confirmed as legitimate, but it was classified under what's called a special access program. The reason it didn't appear in normal databases is because it was never supposed to be in those systems. Agent Harrison looked confused. Sir, how does that explain the automatic security alerts? Agent Harrison, the security alerts were triggered because the mission was so highly classified that the computer systems were programmed to flag any reference to it as a potential security breach. In essence, the security systems were working exactly as designed. They just weren't told that this particular mission was authorized. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. After hours of uncertainty, knowing that he hadn't inadvertently violated security protocols was an enormous weight off his shoulders. However, questions remained about why he hadn't been properly briefed about the true nature of his mission. Colonel Mitchell approached Colonel Hayes. Sir, I appreciate the resolution, but I'm concerned about the operational security implications. If my own security clearance wasn't sufficient to access information about my mission, how was I supposed to handle security challenges during transport? Colonel Hayes consulted his notes before responding. Ma'am, according to the documentation I'm receiving, you were supposed to receive an additional briefing packet that contained enhanced clearance authorizations. That packet was apparently delayed and didn't reach you before departure. Dr. Reynolds shook his head. This explains why some of my research documentation seemed to have classification markings I wasn't familiar with. I assumed they were new formatting standards, but they were actually indicators of special access program materials. Agent Harrison gathered his papers and prepared to leave. Well, this has been educational for everyone involved. Captain Thompson, your aircraft and cargo are being cleared for immediate release. You're authorized to continue to your original destination. Marcus stood and shook hands with both military officers. Sirs, I appreciate your professionalism during this situation. It's clear that everyone was doing their job correctly, even when the circumstances were confusing. As they prepared to leave the secure facility, Colonel Hayes pulled Marcus aside. Captain Thompson, I want you to know that this incident will be documented in your personnel file as a positive example of proper security protocols under unusual circumstances. You handled the situation exactly as you should have. Walking back across the tarmac toward his aircraft, Marcus reflected on the day's events. The world of classified government operations was more complex than he had realized, with layers of security and compartmentalization that even experienced military officers didn't fully understand. His role as a contract pilot had suddenly become much more significant than simply flying from point A to point B. Colonel Mitchell walked beside him, her secured briefcase once again in hand. Captain Thompson, I owe you an apology. When I accepted this mission, I didn't realize the full scope of what we were dealing with. You performed professionally under very stressful circumstances. As they approached the citation, Marcus could see that security personnel were finishing their inspection of his aircraft. Everything appeared to be exactly as he had left it, but he knew he would need to perform a complete pre-flight inspection before departure. The next phase of their mission was about to begin, and now he understood just how important it really was. The pre-flight inspection of his citation took Marcus nearly 45 minutes, much longer than usual. After the security incident at Nellis, he wasn't taking any chances with aircraft safety or potential tampering. Every panel, access door, and external component was carefully examined. The security team had been professional during their inspection, but Marcus wanted to verify personally that nothing had been disturbed. Colonel Mitchell and Dr. Reynolds waited patiently in the terminal building while Marcus completed his detailed inspection. Both passengers seemed more relaxed now that the security issues had been resolved, but Marcus could sense an underlying tension that hadn't been present during the first leg of their journey. The revelation about Special Access Program classification had changed everyone's understanding of their mission's importance. As Marcus performed his exterior inspection, he noticed several unmarked vehicles positioned around the aircraft parking area. Security personnel in civilian clothes were maintaining a discreet perimeter, and he realized their mission was still being closely monitored despite the clearance resolution. The level of protection suggested that the technology they were transporting was even more sensitive than anyone had initially indicated. Inside the aircraft cabin, Marcus discovered that his cargo hold had been resealed with new security tape, bearing classification markings he had never seen before. The documents Dr. Reynolds had been carrying were now secured in a specially designed container that required biometric identification to open. Whatever had been casual about their earlier security protocols had been completely eliminated. Colonel Mitchell approached the aircraft as Marcus finished his inspection. Captain Thompson, we've received updated instructions for the remainder of our flight. Our destination has been changed from Area 51 to a different facility, and our route has been modified to avoid certain controlled airspace. Marcus reviewed the new flight plan documents she handed him. The destination was now listed as a location in Utah that didn't appear on his standard aviation charts. The routing would take them over mountainous terrain that he had flown before, but never with such a sensitive cargo load. Flight time would increase by approximately 30 minutes due to the route changes. Ma'am, this new destination, I don't have approach plates or landing information for that airfield. How am I supposed to safely complete the landing phase? Colonel Mitchell handed him a sealed envelope. The approach information is classified and contained in that packet. You're authorized to open it only when we're within 50 miles of the destination. Until then, follow standard IFR routing to the general area. Dr. Reynolds joined them at the aircraft, carrying his secured laptop and what appeared to be additional classified materials that hadn't been present earlier. Captain Thompson, I should inform you that our mission scope has expanded somewhat. The research data we're transporting is apparently needed for an urgent analysis that's already in progress at our destination. Marcus felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. Mission changes during flight operations often indicated developing situations that could become complicated quickly. However, his job was to transport his passengers safely to their destination, regardless of the political or technical complexities surrounding their mission. The flight to Utah passed without incident, but Marcus remained more vigilant than usual. Air traffic control communications were handled through encrypted channels that he had never used before, and their aircraft was being tracked by multiple radar facilities simultaneously. Every few minutes, Colonel Mitchell would check her secured communication device and occasionally make brief encrypted phone calls. As they flew over the Nevada-Utah border, Dr. Reynolds moved forward to the cockpit area. Captain Thompson, I wanted to thank you for your professionalism today. Most contract pilots would have been rattled by the security incident, but you handled everything perfectly. Marcus appreciated the recognition, but remained focused on his flying duties. Dr. Reynolds, can you tell me anything about what to expect at our destination? I like to be prepared for unusual landing situations. The facility we're going to is one of the most secure research installations in the country. Landing procedures are apparently quite strict, and will be met by personnel who will handle the cargo transfer immediately upon arrival. 50 miles from their destination, Marcus opened the sealed envelope containing the approach information. What he found inside was unlike anything he had seen in 15 years of aviation. The airfield was equipped with electronic systems that could guide aircraft to landing, even in zero visibility conditions. Multiple backup navigation systems were available, and the runway was longer than most commercial airports despite being in a remote mountain location. Colonel Mitchell received a phone call that lasted several minutes and appeared to be quite intense. When she finished, she addressed both Marcus and Dr. Reynolds with obvious concern. Gentlemen, there's been a development at our destination. The research team we're supposed to meet has encountered some technical problems that may affect our mission timeline. Dr. Reynolds looked worried. What kind of technical problems? Are we talking about equipment failures or more serious issues? I'm not entirely sure, but apparently some of the preliminary analysis of similar technology has produced unexpected results. The team needs our documentation to determine whether the problems are related to design, flaws, or external interference. Marcus was beginning to understand that their mission was more complex than anyone had initially realized. The technology they were transporting wasn't just advanced research. It was apparently critical to resolving problems with existing systems that were already in development or deployment. As they began their approach to the Utah facility, Marcus could see that the installation was much larger than he had expected. Multiple buildings were connected by underground tunnels, and the security perimeter extended for several miles in all directions. Aircraft hangars large enough to accommodate military transport planes were positioned around the airfield, though most appeared to be empty. The landing itself was remarkably smooth, guided by the electronic systems described in the classified approach plates. As soon as they touched down, Marcus was directed to taxi to a specific hangar where personnel were already waiting with specialized equipment for cargo handling. Colonel Mitchell gathered her materials as the aircraft engines wound down. Captain Thompson, you'll be remaining overnight at this facility. Quarters have been arranged for you, and you'll receive a detailed briefing about tomorrow's mission in the morning. Marcus looked puzzled. Tomorrow's mission? Ma'am, I was told this was a single transport flight. Dr. Reynolds smiled apologetically. Captain, I'm afraid there's been a slight change in plans. We're going to need your services for several more days, possibly up to a week. The technology we brought here is apparently going to require transport to multiple facilities for comprehensive analysis. As they prepared to disembark, Marcus realized that his simple transport mission had evolved into something much more significant. Whatever technology they had been carrying wasn't just advanced research. It was apparently crucial to national security operations that extended far beyond a single flight. His role as a contract pilot had suddenly become much more important and much more complicated than he had ever imagined possible. The overnight quarters at the Utah facility were more comfortable than Marcus had expected, but sleep didn't come easily. His small room was located in a building that appeared to be designed specifically for visiting personnel. with security measures that reminded him constantly that he was in a highly classified environment. Electronic locks, biometric scanners, and surveillance cameras were visible everywhere. Though the staff treated him courteously and professionally, at 6 in the morning, Marcus was awakened by a gentle knock on his door. A security escort informed him that breakfast was available in the visiting personnel dining facility, followed by a briefing scheduled for 8 o'clock. As he dressed and prepared for the day, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his routine transport mission had evolved into something much more complex and important. The dining facility was surprisingly normal, serving standard breakfast fare that could have been found at any military installation. However, Marcus noticed that all the personnel wore identification badges with classification markings he had never seen before, and conversations were conducted in carefully measured tones that suggested everyone was conscious of security protocols even during casual interactions. Colonel Mitchell and Dr. Reynolds were already seated at a corner table when Marcus arrived with his breakfast tray. Both appeared to have been awake for some time, with Colonel Mitchell reviewing classified documents while Dr. Reynolds worked on his secured laptop. They greeted Marcus warmly, but their expressions suggested that the day ahead would be challenging. "Captain Thompson," Colonel Mitchell began, "we received some interesting developments overnight. The preliminary analysis of the technology we transported yesterday has revealed both promising capabilities and serious concerns." Dr. Reynolds looked up from his laptop. "Marcus, the radar-defeating technology appears to work better than anyone expected, but it also seems to interfere with other electronic systems in ways that weren't anticipated during initial testing." Marcus sipped his coffee while processing this information. "Does that affect our mission today? Are we still transporting materials to other facilities?" Colonel Mitchell nodded. "Yes, but the scope has expanded considerably. We're now part of a multi-site evaluation process that will involve transporting samples to 3 different research facilities over the next 4 days. Each location specializes in different aspects of the technology analysis. The 8 o'clock briefing took place in a secure conference room deep within the facility's main building. Marcus was surprised to find himself in a room with nearly 20 other people, including military officers, civilian researchers, and personnel from various government agencies. The classification level of the briefing was higher than any he had previously attended. Dr. Sarah Chen, the facility's director, began the briefing with a summary of overnight developments. "Ladies and gentlemen, the technology sample we received yesterday represents a significant breakthrough in stealth capabilities, but it also raises questions about potential applications that extend beyond aviation systems." Marcus listened carefully as Dr. Chen explained that the radar-defeating technology could apparently be modified for use in various military applications from ground vehicles to naval systems. However, the electromagnetic effects of the technology were causing interference problems that needed to be thoroughly understood before widespread deployment could be considered. Colonel Mitchell was asked to provide details about the origin of the technology and the research timeline that had led to its current development state. Her presentation revealed that multiple defense contractors had been working on different aspects of the technology for several years, with the recent breakthrough representing the successful integration of previously separate research efforts. Dr. Reynolds presented his analysis of the technical documentation they had transported. His evaluation suggested that the technology was ready for limited field testing, but that comprehensive evaluation would require specialized facilities that were located in different parts of the country. Hence the need for multiple transport missions over the coming days. During a break in the briefing, Marcus approached Dr. Chen with questions about the flight operations he would be conducting. "Dr. Chen, I want to ensure that I understand the security protocols for these upcoming flights. Will I be carrying the same passengers to each location, or will the mission team change?" "Captain Thompson, Colonel Mitchell will accompany you to all destinations, but other personnel will vary depending on the specific expertise needed at each facility. Dr. Reynolds will join you for the first 2 flights, but different researchers will be involved in the later missions." Marcus also learned that his aircraft would be equipped with additional security systems for the remaining flights. Electronic countermeasures would be installed to protect against potential interference from the technology they were transporting. Additionally, each flight would be accompanied by military escort aircraft, though this would be less obvious than the fighter intercept he had experienced the previous day. After the briefing concluded, Marcus spent the afternoon working with facility technicians to install the new security equipment in his citation. The modifications were more extensive than he had expected, requiring updates to his communication systems, navigation equipment, and cargo hold monitoring devices. The technicians were highly skilled and worked efficiently, but the installation process took nearly 6 hours to complete. Colonel Mitchell used the time to coordinate with the various research facilities they would be visiting. Each location had different security requirements, airfield capabilities, and personnel authorization protocols. The complexity of arranging multiple classified missions across several states was becoming apparent, and Marcus gained a new appreciation for the logistical challenges involved in advanced military research programs. Dr. Reynolds spent his afternoon analyzing additional technical data that had been generated by the facility's overnight evaluation of the technology samples. His preliminary findings suggested that the radar defeating capabilities were even more advanced than initial reports had indicated, but the interference problems were also more complex than anyone had anticipated. As evening approached, Marcus completed his preparation for the next day's flight to a facility in Colorado. The flight plan was more complicated than standard routes due to the need to avoid certain controlled airspace areas and to coordinate with military escort aircraft. Weather conditions were expected to be challenging, with mountain turbulence and possible instrument conditions at the destination. During dinner in the facility dining room, Marcus had an opportunity to speak with some of the research personnel who had been working on the technology evaluation. Their enthusiasm for the project was evident, but so was their concern about the potential implications of the technology's capabilities. Several researchers mentioned that the electromagnetic effects they were observing had never been seen before in laboratory testing. Dr. Chen joined Marcus, Colonel Mitchell, and Dr. Reynolds for coffee after dinner. "Captain Thompson, I want to personally thank you for your professionalism during this mission. Your role in transporting this technology safely between research facilities is absolutely critical to our evaluation timeline." Marcus appreciated the recognition, but remained focused on his responsibilities. "Dr. Chen, I'm honored to be involved in such important work. However, I want to make sure that I understand all the potential risks associated with transporting this technology. Are there safety considerations I should be aware of?" "Captain, the technology itself is completely safe during transport. However, the electromagnetic effects could potentially interfere with aircraft electronic systems under certain specific conditions. That's why we've installed the additional shielding and monitoring equipment in your aircraft." As they prepared for an early departure the next morning, Marcus realized that his involvement in this project had given him insight into research capabilities that few people outside the intelligence community ever learned about. The technology they were transporting represented years of advanced development work, and its successful evaluation could significantly impact national defense capabilities for decades to come. The final flight of Marcus's extended mission took place on a crisp morning, with perfect visibility across the Colorado mountains. After 4 days of transporting cutting-edge technology between research facilities, he had gained a deep appreciation for the complexity and importance of the project he had become involved in. Each facility had contributed unique analysis capabilities, and the combined results were apparently exceeding everyone's expectations. Colonel Mitchell had been his constant companion throughout all the flights, coordinating between research teams and managing the intricate security protocols required for transporting such sensitive materials. Her expertise in intelligence operations had been essential for navigating the bureaucratic challenges that arose when multiple agencies and contractors needed to collaborate on classified projects. Dr. Reynolds had participated in the first 3 flights before being replaced by other specialists whose expertise was needed for specific aspects of the technology evaluation. Marcus had enjoyed working with all the researchers, but he was particularly impressed by their dedication to ensuring that the technology was thoroughly understood before any operational decisions were made. The Colorado facility was different from the previous locations they had visited. Located in a mountain valley that provided natural security from observation, the installation was clearly designed for final stage testing of advanced military technologies. Multiple outdoor testing ranges were visible from the air, along with specialized buildings that Marcus assumed contained sophisticated measurement and analysis equipment. As they approached the final destination, Marcus reflected on how much his understanding of military research had evolved over the past week. The radar-defeating technology they had been transporting was apparently just one component of a much larger program designed to maintain technological superiority in an increasingly competitive global environment. The landing at the Colorado facility was routine, but Marcus noticed that the security measures were the most extensive of any location they had visited. Ground personnel wore specialized protective equipment, and the aircraft parking area was surrounded by electronic monitoring devices that he assumed were designed to detect any interference from the technology they were carrying. Colonel Mitchell gathered her materials as they prepared to disembark for the final time. "Captain Thompson, I want you to know that your performance during this mission has been exceptional. The research teams at every facility have commented on your professionalism and attention to security protocols." Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the Colorado facility director, met them personally at the aircraft. Her enthusiasm for the project was immediately apparent, and she explained that the final phase of technology evaluation would determine whether the system was ready for operational testing with actual military units. "Captain Thompson," Dr. Walsh said, "your role in this project has been more important than you might realize. The ability to transport sensitive technology safely between research facilities is often the limiting factor in how quickly we can complete comprehensive evaluations." Marcus appreciated the recognition, but remained curious about the long-term implications of the technology they had been working with. "Dr. Walsh, can you tell me anything about how this technology might be used if it proves successful?" "Captain, the radar-defeating capabilities we've been evaluating could revolutionize how military aircraft operate in contested environments. However, the electromagnetic effects we've discovered suggest potential applications that extend far beyond aviation systems." Over the next several hours, Marcus had opportunities to observe some of the testing procedures that were being conducted with the technology samples he had transported. The sophistication of the evaluation equipment was impressive, and the preliminary results seemed to exceed the expectations of even the most optimistic. Researchers Colonel Mitchell spent her time coordinating with Pentagon officials who were monitoring the evaluation results in real time. The importance of the project was evident from the level of attention it was receiving from senior military leadership, and Marcus realized that his transport missions had been supporting research that could influence national defense strategies for years to come. As the day progressed, Marcus learned that the technology evaluation had been successful enough to warrant immediate expansion to additional research programs. However, the electromagnetic interference issues that had been discovered during testing would require significant additional research before operational deployment could be considered. Dr. Walsh approached Marcus during the afternoon with news about his return flight. "Captain Thompson, we have a special request for your return trip to Langley. Colonel Mitchell will be accompanying you, but you'll also be carrying preliminary evaluation reports that need to reach Pentagon officials immediately." The return flight to Virginia was uneventful, but Marcus found himself reflecting on the week's experiences with a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. His role as a contract pilot had given him unique insight into military research programs that most people would never know existed, and his contribution to the project's success had been recognized by senior officials at multiple facilities. Colonel Mitchell used the flight time to prepare her final reports for Pentagon leadership. The comprehensive evaluation of the radar-defeating technology had apparently exceeded expectations in most areas, while revealing challenges that would require additional research and development efforts as they approached Langley Air Force Base for landing. Marcus realized that his involvement in the project was likely to lead to additional opportunities for similar missions. The specialized security clearances and experience he had gained during the week made him valuable for future transport operations involving classified technologies. After landing and completing the final cargo transfer procedures, Colonel Mitchell shook hands with Marcus in recognition of a successful mission. "Captain Thompson, I've submitted a commendation for your file recommending you for additional Special Access Program transport missions. Your professionalism and reliability during this project have made you an asset to the national security community." As Marcus completed his post-flight paperwork and secured his aircraft for the night, He reflected on how a routine transport mission had evolved into one of the most important and interesting experiences of his aviation career. The radar-defeating technology they had transported would likely remain classified for years. But Marcus knew that his small role in its evaluation had contributed to research that could protect military personnel and advance national defense capabilities. The phone call from his contracting company came the next morning, offering him a permanent position supporting Special Access Program transport missions. Marcus accepted immediately, knowing that his week-long adventure had opened the door to a career that would allow him to contribute meaningfully to the most advanced military research programs in the country. His clearance level had been permanently upgraded, and his future missions would involve transporting technologies and personnel related to projects that would shape the future of national defense.